Have you ever written down your story? And could you dive deeper into your truth if you fictionalized it and made up extra things that really didn't sound like you? This is Angelscapes and podcast, and I'm your host, Nancy Smith. Joining me is my guest, Andrea Burdick. She's a spiritual author of at least 4 books. Um, so I'm going to ask Andrea what was her journey to become an author, and we're going to discuss what themes she wants to express as she writes. She definitely has a purpose and how she approaches her work. So Andrea grew up in Los Angeles, and her memoir is called My Journey from La La Land. I love that title. And my journey from La La Land to Wonderland. She tells her story of discovering spirit. And then how that transformed her life. And Andrea is also, I believe, a therapist.
Yes,
Were
I
the
was a
ther
psychotherapist for 10 years.
Yeah, so I am really wanting to hear. We're excited about hearing that the psychotherapist and then um, the spiritual opening. In addition to her memoir, Andrea has published 3 novels of a spiritual awakening. One is called Deja Vu in 2003, and a psychological suspense thriller about a psychic and a psychotherapist and a psychopath. And she finds herself in heaven in 2022, about bereavement, death, and afterlife. And her newly published novel is The 9 Past Lives of Kitty Cats. So all of these sound phenomenal. And I also have been reading a little bit about how you have a special interest in reincarnation. So welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
So tell me a little bit about how you have your spiritual opening and then you have the writing. Which came first?
Um, I would say the spiritual awakening. What happened was, like the protagonist of the book, I had a spiritual awakening in 1969. She had a true near-death experience. I didn't. What happened to me is I had a spiritually transformative experience where I thought I was going to die. I was approaching a head-on collision that looked like it was going to kill me, but there was actually no collision, no injury, and I still had a really extreme feeling of transformation. I called it at the time a cosmic love bomb. It was like I just felt this huge amount of love, and it was as if I were on the other side, but I couldn't have been because I was conscious, I was aware, and I didn't even get hurt. So it was, I think it was meant to be, and so then after that, I had to kind of make sense of things. I had been raised to be agnostic, and I wasn't that particularly interested in Judaism, which is the religion I was born into. But after this experience, I just felt a sense of inner knowing that there really is a God, there really is an afterlife, and it was like, wow, because that was not what I was taught at all.
Interesting how that works out.
Yes.
Sometimes that's terrific. So once you had that, wow, that what did you call that, psychic bomb or whatever?
Cosmic love bomb, yeah.
Cosmic love bomb. Once you had that, what were your steps after that? What happened? What did you choose?
Well, because it was such a long time ago, no, people were not open to it then in the same way that they are now. And I can't say that at the beginning I took it all that seriously. I was struggling back and forth with how is this possible? How could this have happened? But I did then start looking into it. And and in the book, there's kind of a history of all of the books as they came out,
Which book was that?
well, Raymond Moody's book,
Okay.
and Brian Weiss's book, and
Okay.
Shirley MacLaine. Now, this is stuff from back in the 70s.
Right.
And it had, whenever there was something to study or something to learn, I got into it. And of course, now with all of the, now it seems to be everywhere. If you want to access it, you can access it. But in those days, although I was very interested and drawn to it, even as a child, I also had memories of past lives. I wasn't sure about that because I was trained pretty much the same way everybody else is, to be rational and scientific. And I thought, I wasn't sure how it could be. But the very first experience I had of this was also in the book, which is I was watching television, and it was a show about the Holocaust. And as I'm watching it, I had this thought, oh, that's how I died.
Really?
And
Oh,
I was maybe in my early 20s. And I
okay.
thought, what do you mean that's how I died? I'm not dead. I just could, so the kind of feeling of going back and forth between the way that this feels and the way that I'm trying to reason it out is a lot of the same struggle that I gave to the protagonist too.
Okay.
It's fiction, only because, I can't go into the kind of detail of some of these things in the same way that I could if all of it were true. But I also tell 9 stories of the past lives of the main characters. And I started out feeling like, okay, a couple of these may have been real past lives for me, and the rest I'm just going to make up. What happened is, in the course of writing a book, by the time I got near the end, I thought, you know what? I'm not sure I made these up, because the more I wrote and the more I got into the final chapters, the more I felt like, this could be real too. And, from my background as a therapist, people will say, well, I don't know if this is a true memory or if I imagine it. I used to say, well, it's still produced by your unconscious, whether you're making it up, quote unquote, or whether it really happened. And so it says something about you and your inner world. And there was a certain transformative aspect to actually writing the book too.
Really? Talk to me about that. What transformative aspect?
Well, I started out feeling like I'm writing a novel, and I knew that there were certain things in it that actually had happened to me, and I used that to, inform what I was writing in the fiction. But by the end of it, I thought, I just kept having more and more strong feelings of this really happened, or this was really true, or whatever. And now, when I wrote about the actual past lives, I researched them. So historically, each time period did happen. So, the way I've looked at it is the past lives are what I call the histories. They're stories of people who lived in history.
Okay.
And then the spiritual stuff I call the mysteries. So it's kind of like the histories and the mysteries.
I love that. Love that. Where can people find this 9 past lives? The 9 past lives of kitty cats. That's on Amazon, right? Is there anybody?
Yes, all of my books are available on Amazon.
Okay.
And I think all but one of them are available on either Kindle or as a paperback.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why I think Barnes and Noble. Sometimes when something's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, but
Well, you can go in any bookstore and order it.
yeah. Okay. Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So so the 9 past lives of kitty cats was your most recent book.
Yes.
What was the first book out of the gate for
The
you?
first book I wrote when I was still working as a psychotherapist, and it was called Deja Vu. And it's about a therapist who has a psychic client. And she's trying to figure out, is this someone who's delusional or is she actually psychic?
Right.
So it starts out that way. And then what happens is, as the book goes on, the client begins telling the therapist stories about dreams she has. And
Wow.
unbeknownst to the client, but well known to the therapist, she's talking about the therapist's other clients. And the therapist is thinking, how is this happening? Has there been a breach of confidentiality or what? But no, she's psychic and she is picking up on things from the therapist's other clients. So it goes on to become a suspense thriller. And the therapist is working with a client who is in an abusive relationship with a very sick man. And it goes on from there. I won't say the end because it would be a spoiler.
Oh, please don't spoil it. But actually, I was kind of thinking I wanted to look at that one. That would be really, really interesting. And that was the book where you were exploring your own spirituality and the superpowers, the supernatural, the psychic gifts, and were they opening up for you as you were writing? Do you suppose, or was it a way for you to accept your gifts?
There were a lot of aspects to it. First of all, prior to becoming a therapist, I had been in my own therapy, and I think I like to think of my life as two sections. One is life on the side of the couch, so to speak, of being a client, and life on the other side of the couch of being the therapist. And in between that, of course, I was continuously changing, and I did have a very difficult childhood that is spelled out in the book, but difficult but also funny aspects too. And so that's what happened in the memoir.
Yeah, oh, beautiful. But the rest were not memoirs. Were the rest fiction, nonfiction, a mixture?
Right. Deja Vu is a novel. She Found Herself in Heaven was the next one. And that one was about, it starts at the beginning of the book, and the protagonist, the main character, is on the other side, and she doesn't even understand that she's dead. She doesn't know what happened. And the story kind of revolves around an accidental shooting and trying to, so every other chapter takes place on Earth, and then every other chapter takes place on the other side. So she's doing things on the other side where, she's meeting with her soul group, and she's, learning about her past lives and that kind of thing. And then in the meantime, she died very young, leaving 4-year-old twin girls and a young husband. And it talks about their bereavement process and also their investigation, because the police cannot figure out what happened.
Oh,
so that gets revealed as the book goes on as well.
That's going to be a good one. That's going to be edge of the chair one. You have a lot of, it seems like past lives is one of your favorite topics. Of all the spiritual things, you think you're landing on past lives as being your favorite? Or
I would say so, because I did have experiences around remembering things from the Holocaust all through my childhood. And of course, that was not, that it wasn't even, it was like I felt it on a spiritual level. I felt it like internally, but I didn't understand it intellectually, because I thought, how is this possible? I wasn't born until 1950 and the war was over, but things would come back to me. And again, as time, I would say what's so interesting about this is some of this was revealed over such a huge period of time. It's almost as if my own life, being at this point 70, soon to be 74 years long, is a historical era in and of itself, of going from the 20th and the 21st century. And so there's that aspect. And I think to some degree, everybody's life is kind of like a book, in that we all have different chapters and different sections of our life that are, different things are going on at different times. I just recently visited a friend of mine from LA who had 4 husbands. I mean, that's certainly different chapters.
Oh, absolutely. I talked to somebody who really is a remote viewer who studies time a lot, and she says it's like a bubbles all around us. It's not a straight line as we think it, as we experience it in human lives, but you could just reach out and pull out the different bubbles from space and time. I love that description because it also gives those past lives the idea that they're happening at the same time that our lives are happening. Have you ever had that experience or felt like
I have heard that and I've read that any number of times. I have a lot of trouble wrapping my head around that particular one.
yeah,
I just can't.
yeah,
I'm like, what do you mean? It happened in the past, so it's
yeah.
not happening now. I'm still very much earthbound.
I'm with you there. I'm with you there. Do you know Michael Newton, the author?
Yes. I don't know him personally, but I know.
No, I meant, but the Journey of
Yeah.
Souls.
Yes.
He had regressed one person, and this gentleman said, "Oh, this is I'm a woman. I'm a single mother. I'm really struggling, and it's now." And I'm way out in the Midwest. I'm way out, well, I'm out west, and I'm here in New England. And isn't that interesting? So,
Yeah.
and I was wondering if maybe he should just write her a check and send it to her. I'm kidding, but
Yeah.
but the whole concept of time gets shifted around when we talk about past lives, and um, so you talk a lot about your change of beliefs through experiencing these past lives, and you experience them through writing. I had experienced a past life where, as a spontaneous memory, I was someplace. I grew up in the Midwest, and I went to this place called Greenfield Village out in Michigan, and they had transposed or transplanted a whole village from the 1600s, a house, and it's the blacksmith and all this stuff is a little village. And I walked in there and I just had to sit down because I saw a whole movie in front of myself being in the 16th century. So I'd love to hear what it was like for you as you explored these past lives. You seem to be exploring them through writing, or was there
So, sometimes it's through travel. I have had a couple of experiences of going to a foreign country and not, just thinking of it like it's a vacation like anybody else. And then when I get there, having really strong feelings. Now, one time I had a contact from someone who said she was my older sister in the Holocaust.
oh
So
wow.
she said, on the upcoming trip that you're taking, which was like a cruise of the Danube, she said, you're going to be in the area where you were during a past life. And I was your older sister in that life, she says to me. I was 7 and she was like 19. So she was like the oldest in the family. I was the youngest in the family, and there were 2 brothers between us. And she told me this whole story. Now, she didn't give me names, but since then, it's amazing how things, in my case, it isn't like always I know it right away. Sometimes it's like things happen over just, it seems like my whole lifespan, new things have been coming out.
It's amazing.
I
What's
mean, I'm taking a trip to Ireland in a couple of weeks. And I also had a contact from somebody who said she was my mother in a past life in Ireland. And who knows if something will be familiar when I get there. I don't know. I've never been to Ireland.
Of course it would be. I would just wow, because you want to go to Ireland. I would say probably yes. Well, in these past lives, do you remember much from them, like the Holocaust? Do you remember much about that lifetime?
That's the one that I remember the most because it wasn't very long before I was born in this life.
Okay.
And also, I remember I was about 4 years old and my father took me to a Jewish deli. And the woman behind the counter had a tattoo on her arm. And of course, I didn't know anything about that. So I said, why do you have numbers on your arm? And my father said, was trying to sort of shut me up.
Yeah, yeah, that's how they do.
understand.
Yeah.
And they then said something to each other in Yiddish, which I didn't understand. So years later, I said to him, "Do you remember this thing in this delicatessen? And what did you say to her?" And he told me that what she said to him was, "Don't scold her. Think about how wonderful it is that she doesn't know anything about it."
Yes.
And so, and I didn't, but I knew that something big was happening. I had this feeling like this is a big deal. This numbers thing on the arm isn't just I knew on some level that this was something big. I couldn't have explained it at the time. I was just a little kid, but I knew it was important. And that was kind of the same thing with the other past lives that I remembered. Like when I traveled in Europe, I went to a place where I had been a monk in a monastery. Now, I didn't just immediately walk in and say, "Oh, I used to be a monk here." But over time, things would come back to me. And, sometimes it was in dreams. A lot of times things would come out in dreams.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that happens to the protagonist. So it's sort of fiction. I would almost say that the Nine Past Lives of Kitty Katz is fictionalized memoir to some extent, and some of it is just plain fiction.
Yeah. Well, when I'm talking to students about building up their intuition, I said it starts with like you're making up a story or you're daydreaming about something, and then it takes on its own track.
Yes.
And as much as you want to change it, it's not going to change because that's not what it is. It is the memory becomes a memory. And do you have that experience sometimes?
Yeah, and to that extent, it really is quite different than fiction because, like for instance, I have one of my neighbors grew up in India, and one of the past lives in the book is about it was going to be about a woman who grew up in India and what happened with her, and she said, "Oh, you can't write that story because women weren't allowed to go out without a chaperone, and you have her doing things that are very modern and very American compared to what would have been allowed in India at that time."
Yeah.
So I just changed it to a man, and then the story I'd written worked. So obviously that's the kind of change you can make in fiction that you can't make it in real life. But there was a kind of sense of being like, I remember one day I had a sense of, I remember what it used to feel like to be a man, like,
yeah.
and just odd, peculiar thoughts like that off and on throughout my life.
So what do you remember about being a man?
Well, I actually remember like having much stronger sexual drives than I have in this life as a woman. Yeah, that's what I remember is like what it felt like to have a penis. I mean, it's very weird, but that's what I remembered.
Do you remember getting your way more? I mean, in a nice way. Do you remember as a woman, we take it for granted that we have to struggle, that things just don't come our way. We have to work for them. But did you have a memory? I'm curious. And being a man that you didn't have to struggle so much? Or maybe that
I had memories in a couple of them of being a man who was a perpetrator.
Oh, okay. So
one of them was a warrior, and he was into, what warriors do, which is, murder and mayhem, and rape. And then I had another past life that was in which I killed someone. Now, again, can I prove that these things really happen? No. I was always told as a child, you've got a great imagination. I still do, and my grandson seems to have inherited it. The stories that kid tells are really hilarious. But there's no way to prove it. On the other hand, I don't have any evidence that would disprove it either. Little things, like for instance, I remembered at one point something to do with the Holocaust and having a light that you turn on. Now, I've lived in the United States my whole life. You flip on a switch. but I remembered it as pushing a button. So
Oh.
then when I went to Amsterdam and I went to visit Anne Frank's house, I looked at the light switch and it was like a button.
Oh my goodness. I grew up in an old house and we had to push buttons to turn the lights on. But yeah,
But I didn't, how would I know such a thing,
yeah.
So it was just a lot of little things like that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's those little details speak
Yes, and
volumes.
I think to me, at this point, the strongest real evidence of reincarnation being reality is these children who are born remembering past lives, because little kids can't make up things in that kind of detail, and
No.
nor do they have any way of knowing what they actually know.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story. My daughter, we moved into a new house and we had first time we ever had pavement, and before we had a gravel driveway. And so to celebrate, I went out and bought those big chalks, and she was 5 and my son was 3 or 4.5 and 3. And she started drawing this huge thing. I didn't know what she was doing. She goes, I can't finish it, Mom. She was so upset because she couldn't finish it. Now, she had her favorite movie was called The 12 Dancing Princesses. It was a fairy tale. Now, having said that, I went and looked at the drawing, and son of a gun, it was exactly half of a building. And I knew what the other half looked, so I started to draw it in. It was the Taj Mahal. I put the turrets, and I said, and there was a big water here. How did you know that, Mom? And it was because I played in there a lot when I was little, and I had my older sisters took care of me because my mom had died, and I never knew my mom. And she's telling me this whole story. So I looked up the Taj Mahal and the story of the Taj Mahal, and the youngest of the mother died giving birth to the youngest child, and these older siblings raised her. And I said, I have a little princess here. But it's those things that you can't refute it. I mean, how does a 5-year-old know how to draw the Taj Mahal? So you must have stories like that everywhere. I mean, tell me some stories.
Well, they're always like just little subtle things, like a sense of knowing about stuff that I know I don't know about, if that makes sense. I mean, I know I didn't learn it in school or something. Or
Right.
here's a weird coincidence. One of the past lives in my book takes place in the Taj Mahal. It's that kind of thing that it's like,
Wow.
okay. I mean, it's either synchronicity, or in Yiddish we say beshert, which is like fate. It's meant to be. Everybody gets all excited about coincidence, and it's like there seems to be something behind that too. So it's not like I know everything. I just say it's kind of like ding, ding, ding. This is something.
Yeah. Yeah. You feel gravitated towards it. It sounds familiar. It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's terrific. When you wrote to me, you wrote some really nice thoughts, and one of them you were describing how you continue to study even now. You love the paranormal and psychic phenomena, and you mentioned something about Eastern and Jewish mysticism. So all
Yeah.
those sound really, really fascinating. Where are you on this?
Well, there's something called Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is, I never even got a regular Jewish education. I never learned Hebrew, which is why I probably didn't, go to synagogue, because I thought, well, God understands English. I'm not going to learn a foreign language just to talk to God. Just plus my parents didn't want to pay for it because they didn't believe in it. But anyway, so I've been interested in Jewish mysticism, and I read it. I don't always understand it, but I'm always into like, pursuing it. And then the Eastern mysticism, I came across this book. A friend of mine told me about a book that was the autobiography of Jesus as channeled through this woman. So I read this book, and it was all about during the years when Jesus wasn't in the Bible, like from the time he was 12 until he came back in his early 30s, that he had actually traveled to India and learned a lot about Eastern mysticism. Now, I have no way of knowing if that's what happened. This was thousands of years ago, but it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. It does. He seemed to know a lot of things.
And then since then, I've heard the same thing elsewhere. And the other thing that's said in the book is that he was married to Mary Magdalene and had 2 sons.
I've read that plenty of times. And
Yeah.
I've also read that he was married to Mary Magdalene. At the time of his death, she was pregnant, and they hid her away. They took her. A group saved her and took her away. There's a lot of stories on Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
Yeah, and it turns out that I guess I've heard that there's a lot of stories about Jesus and his teachings in India at the time.
Really? Wow.
Again, I can't cite notations about it, but it seems like it comes up quite a bit.
Yes, yes.
I also read something once that said it was talking about the chalice, the Holy Grail,
Holy Grail, yes.
and they were saying what the Holy Grail really is that there's genetic children of Jesus. That's what the Holy Grail really is. I don't know if that's true either.
I've heard that it's a couple of different places myself.
Yeah.
Referred to the chalice, the Holy Grail was the bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Well, that was a story in a movie that those famous movies that I can't remember the name of that one. Angels and Demons or something with
Yeah.
But that was there. But
Dan Brown, right?
Dan Brown. And so there was that, but I also read about it in other people who've studied. There was a book called The 9 Faces of Christ, and then there was another one called The Alabaster Jar. I don't know if those have some really fascinating histories in them. And yeah, so that time was a fantastic time. Wonder if you have a past life in that time. Do you have any memories of that?
Not that I know of. Again, I mean, even if I remember 2 or 3 of them that are actually true, I mean, think of how long time is and how many different past lives you can have, especially in the olden days. People had very short lives compared to now. And
Shit.
but there's a lot of talk about what it's like emotionally for Kitty, the main character in this book, to go through the emotions of trying to sort out, actually emotionally feeling the feelings that she had in other lives when she wasn't herself. And also to wrap her mind around, how could I have done this? It's like so not her in this life, and the whole idea of, well, you were Catholic in this life and Muslim in that life and Christian in this life. And, it's hard to even imagine it. But I believe it's true. And I believe that the thing that I believe about reincarnation is that it makes more sense than anything else as an explanation. To me, the reason it makes more sense than anything else is it never made sense to me that God was going to send people to torture for eternity for doing something wrong. I don't think anybody would do that to their own kids. So why would God do it? If, I think God's probably a better parent than we are. I mean, people can lose their temper and spank their kid, but they're not putting them in the torture of hell for eternity. And to me, what it makes more sense to say, well, you did the best you could in that life, and you kind of, you can do better. So let's give it another go. That makes more sense to me as a positive, loving thing that God would do, and not, this punitive, harsh, judgmental feeling. And I think half the reason people are so judgmental towards themselves is because the society is so indoctrinated in, sin and shame and blame. And that, of course, came up all the time when I was working as a therapist.
Oh, I bet. So let me ask you this. Is there a heaven? Or is there a hell? Or is there not a hell?
Some people have a hell-ish experience because that's what they expect, and because they have lower vibrations, so they want to remain with other people who are into doing those things. You know,
Mhm.
like at one of the jobs I had as a social worker was working with adolescent male violent and sexual offenders. And if you know, some of them grew up that way. They were literally taught to be criminals by their criminal parents. And you know, if that's what you know and that's what you grew up in, that's what's familiar to you, and that's what you're going to go back to, which is why, you know, recidivism is such a problem. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on the original question.
That's how I was just saying heaven and hell, and you talked about people having a hellish experience, and you're raised to be a certain way. A criminal raises a criminal, which I think is a really, really good point. We take that a little further is that if that's what you think is normal,
Right.
should you get punished for that? Would God punish you for that, or is that the experience that you've meant to come here to work with?
I worked with a young woman once, and she told me that her father would come home from work every day and beat her and not even pretend she'd done anything wrong. He would just beat her every single day.
Oh,
And she said the very first time she spent the night at a friend's house, she said to her friend, "Oh, when is your father going to give us our beatings?"
oh,
She thought that was just what happened because she was a little kid and she didn't know any better.
okay. Oh my goodness.
Now that's a true story.
That is a sad true story. So maybe hell is on earth, and
Yeah. And I think that people can get in a frame of mind where they're creating obstacles for themselves or creating a hellish kind of experience. But I do not think that there's, you know, eternal damnation or anything of the sort. I do believe in heaven because when I had that spiritually transformative experience with the cosmic love bomb, I felt like I was there. I mean, it didn't feel anything like here. It felt like all you know, you can hear a million times, oh, God loves you and God is loving and all that. That's different than feeling it. And I'm telling you, I felt it.
felt it. Well, that's it. So something you felt the love of God directly. Do you still have that experience? Are you still accessing direct love
Yes, I
from?
do. I do. I really do. And you know, very much like the character in the book, my husband is an agnostic. We were when we are married, he was a Christian agnostic. I was a Jewish agnostic, but we were both pretty much the same religion because neither one of us believed. So, you know, it worked. And then as time has gone on, I mean, he has had a lot of struggle with, you know, what happened to my wife, you know, and
How's he doing now with that? That's 4 books later. Yeah.
he it isn't that he wants to disrespect me. It's just that he just doesn't agree. And he is the, you know, first of all, there's a disconnect between somebody who's a therapist and very emotional and very spiritual and somebody who's a high-tech computer engineer. So, you know, they say opposites attract. That's really true. And, you know, my weak points are his strong points and vice versa.
Okay.
So, you know, it's worked for 54 years. So, you know,
bless you.
I've been married a long, long time, but some things still, you know, he still has that kind of male thing of, you know, let me explain the way the world really is.
I don't think that anyone
Mansplaining. It's like,
yeah.
Are they born with it? I don't know.
Could be. But we, as women, I'm sure we do things and they'll nickname it someday.
Oh, absolutely. You know, again, one of the ways that I can handle it if I don't like something he does is I say, well, living with me is probably no picnic either.
Yeah. That's gorgeous, gorgeous. So I love that. So we have the beautiful Kabbalah that you study at times. And I know that study is very in depth with the Kabbalah, but does the Kabbalah, I think it supports reincarnation, or is it neutral on that?
Yes. In fact, I saw an Orthodox rabbi give a talk on YouTube recently about the Jewish belief in reincarnation. And apparently, you know, I've also heard that Jesus believed in reincarnation, and it was what the church did, after he died, that took that out of it.
I've been wondering about that because I have heard some of the I don't know where it was that Jesus did talk about reincarnation, but then other people talked about that Jesus was incarnated himself from, I don't know if it's Ezekiel.
Elijah or something, or Elijah, the reincarnation of Elijah the prophet, or one of the prophets. I don't remember who it was.
Ascended, I think, to heaven or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think he got to skip being human. So he wanted to face the human experience, so I wouldn't be surprised. But they did have, I was reading about his was an Essene, who was Jewish, but the Essene was another faction or another group.
Yeah.
Different teachings.
Right.
Still Jewish, but different teachings, and very mystical. I heard the Essenes were very mystical.
Yeah.
But you have also talked about channeling the angels. Now, the Kabbalah, I read about the angels of the Kabbalah. Are you connecting to the angels through the Kabbalah?
Yes. What happened with me is I started watching Michael Sandler's show on YouTube, and he wrote a book called Automatic Writing Experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I've always been into writing. I mean, I was taking creative writing in high school, and I've always, the main reason I didn't pursue it is I thought, how do you make a living as a writer? I mean, I'm still asking the same question.
I hear you. Yeah.
Good thing I don't need to make a living anymore. I'm retired, but okay. At any rate, this is what's happening to me at this age, is I lose my train of thought. So where was I?
We're going to talk about channeling angels, and that you were.
Oh yeah. So anyway, I got the book. I learned the technique, and it didn't happen right away, but maybe by the third time I did it, it was like I was coming up with stuff that was so good. I thought, I'd love to think that I'm good enough to write this, but some of it used words I didn't even know. And then I would look them up in the dictionary, and I would be like, yeah, that's the right word. All right. Or concepts I didn't know. And I've been doing this for years. I don't do it every day, but practically every day. I get up in the morning, very early in the morning, I meditate, and then I do the automatic writing. And it's really kind of amazing. It gives me, I feel like I have a private line directly with the angels. And, they think I'm funny.
The angels think you're funny?
Yeah, the angels think I'm funny because I don't like the idea that I would just be, I would just be like the secretary doing shorthand of what they're telling me. I said, why don't we say we're collaborating? They thought that was hilarious. They said, well, we're collaborating.
We're collaborating, honey. I'm here in flesh and blood. I got the ink stains to show it. We're collaborating.
I like that idea. I thought, a real angel and they're talking to me,
Yeah. So who are your favorite angels, or do they identify themselves as individual, or are they just?
Well, the one I'm thinking a lot about recently is Metatron, because I heard that he was the one that was very particularly connected with reincarnation. And I would say the more I've studied so many different things, the more I think reincarnation is the most important. And one of the storylines in my novel, The Past Lives of Kitty Cats, is Kitty's best friend is an African-American young woman. And so all through the whole book, they're still in touch, and they're still, best friends. And it talks a lot about what happens in her life as well as Kitty's life. And if you think about it, if people really understood that, maybe you were Black in a past life, maybe you were Jewish, maybe you were maybe you were a Nazi or whatever. If you really got into it's all about us versus them, you would realize, well, wait a minute, how can it be us versus them if I used to be them and they used to be my group?
Exactly.
So I think that there's like a really strong spiritual impact to that. I also think that there's a really strong spiritual impact to the fact that women are the ones who have children. I feel like women have a closer connection with God because God is the creator.
Okay.
We have the gift of being able to create a new life within our body. Not to say men don't make their contribution, because they do, but I think that's a very sacred and a very special gift that we have as women. So from my point of view, if there's going to be a difference between men and women, we're the hot stuff.
We are the hot stuff.
We are the hot stuff.
And we hold the mystery, right?
And we should all go back to the days where they were worshiping goddesses, because I can really get enrolled in that program.
Absolutely. I think so. I think if the technology revolution was hitting during the goddess realm, I think it would come out totally different than what it is now.
Exactly.
What do you think about why this angel is popping into my head? I don't know, but Archangel Uriel. Do you know much about Uriel?
No, I really don't, but I do include Uriel in the prayers at the beginning. So I haven't really done enough research on Uriel.
I think Uriel wants to talk to you, because every time I look at my screen, I see Uriel, but then I look at it again, I'm seeing it like dyslexic. But I think that angel wants to speak to you.
Well, I think I'll look into that and pursue that.
That's the angel to me is administrate. Whoops, hold on a second. We're just going to come in and we're going to come out. Uriel to me is the archangel of transformation and ministration, creating what you need to create to make the change that you need to make. So maybe there's another book coming out of that one. So I'd like to hear about that from you.
That very much is a major theme in not only my life, but in the lives of Kitty. Now, at the end of the book, Kitty starts seeing a spiritual consultant, like a therapist who has special knowledge of spirituality. And she starts learning about how all of the past lives fit together and what it says about her current life now. So it's kind of a form of therapy which may exist, but I've never heard of it. There's another form of therapy that I think is very germane to all of this, which is there's a form of therapy called narrative therapy, where you do therapy by rewriting your own story.
I've heard of that. I haven't experienced it. Have you? I mean, I think it's fascinating. I think it's, have you participated in that, or are you?
Well, I think in my writing, I am participating in it, but I haven't participated in it with the guidance of a narrative therapist teaching me how to do it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's your next step. One of your next steps.
I have to come back because I got a lot of other fun things to do, and I'm running out of time for this life.
Well, leave a big stamp and on the world, and when you come back, it'll be there for you to pick up. But, oh my goodness.
But what's the most important to me is having people read my books. I want to leave this world feeling like I had something to say and I said it and people heard it. I don't care about money it's too late to become a best-selling author or anything like that. That if that ever happens, it'll be in a future lifetime. But I want people to read what I wrote, because I want to feel like most of what I wrote came from my own experiences and my own struggles and my own pain. And I feel like if I can impart something to other people the easy way, where I had to go the hard way by, why wouldn't I do that? You know what I mean? It's like, like if somebody went through something and it was really difficult, if they shared their experience with somebody else, that's very healing for the other person. And so that's the real reason I want to me, that's the best dream of being a writer, is knowing that you could touch the life of someone you didn't even see, never met. It's one thing to say I'm touching the lives of my clients. And yes, you probably are, or your friends, or even, people you barely know. But as a writer, this could be someone who speaks another language, lives in another country, and somehow there's a power and a meaning in what you wrote in that book, and they're going to benefit from it. I love that idea.
I do. That's, I'll be honest, why I wanted to have you on the podcast is one of the messages that I think you bring forward is we each have a voice. We each have a story to tell. And you are a person of full of wisdom. And we'll go through your books again so people can pick up at least one of them because you have had such a full life and you have chosen to have such a full life. So you have a lot of little pearls of wisdom that may lead to somebody else finding their pearls of wisdom. So that's why I said, this woman is something else. And I feel that we can have very powerful influences on other people without being a bestseller. And
Right,
then our
exactly.
voice means something. And so when people are doubting, well, I had nothing to say, or why would anyone want to hear me on that one? I'm like, why wouldn't they?
And the angels assure me that people who are supposed to find things find them.
Oh, they do. They do.
What's the old saying that when the pupil is ready, the teacher appears?
Yes, yes. When the teacher's ready, the pupil appears both ways, Don't
That's
you
true too.
learn tons of people? I bet all of your clients, you probably taught you more than anything else you could learn from. So let's go over those books again. So the guys can look up Andrea Burdick, probably Google her or go to Amazon, look up Andrea Burdick, which I did. And you can find all of her books. The first one is Deja Vu. And the next, My Journey from La La Land to Wonderland is.
Yeah, that's the actual real story of my real life. That's not fiction. Although we all sort of fictionalize things by what we consciously remember.
It into a story so people could understand it.
Right.
And then so we have Deja Vu, and then Journey. Then what was the? And
She
then,
found herself in heaven is pretty much about the afterlife and the connection between the afterlife and people here on earth.
beautiful. And then we have the 9 Lives of Kitty Cats.
Which is
So
pretty much all about reincarnation.
and
So they all explore kind of different areas.
They really do. I think if you're gonna want to know about these different aspects in a spiritual path, I find them. If I want to know about history, I want to watch a documentary or a fictionalized history so I can get it in my head and it sticks. And I feel like you have a lot to teach through the way you do storytelling. And I feel like grab some of these books, guys, and I bet you they're easy read.
Yeah, they are. I try to write them in a very in the vernacular, pretty much the way we talk. And people who are my friends always say, "Oh, your dialogue sounds just like you."
Well, good. It was like so beautiful. So thank you for sharing this. Let's go. Want to touch base if there's. I read on medium.com. Is it medium.org or medium.com?
Yeah, medium.com. And I was originally attracted to it. I was like, oh, it's about mediums. But that's just the name of it. People write about all kinds of subjects. But that's kind of funny that I connected to it with that way. But I primarily write a lot of poetry. I write articles, everything from politics to real life stories and things like that. But I've always been very into the poetry. I started writing a lot of poetry starting when I was 15. And that has never stopped. I've written poetry pretty much all the way through my whole life.
Beautiful. How wonderful. Very nice. I think poetry is not a lost art form, but it's not, where we hear poetry is in songs.
Yes, song lyrics. Bob Dylan is definitely a poet.
Yeah. And so it's not poetry. I think written poetry in books, it's a little bit, I'd like to see that more, but we hear it all the time, that expression from your soul. So what do you think are the most important topics today, right now, that you would want to address or talk about?
To me, what's going on right now is that there's been a shift over, let's say, the last second half of the 20th century, away from reality and towards manipulating things to make it okay to lie, cheat, steal, murder, etc. I mean, I think that if you go back and you read stories from the 16, 17, 1800s, people were very, wanting to kind of follow the rules. Now, from our point of view, the way they followed it was maybe rigid in comparison with the way we are now, but at least they had values and they understood there's a right and there's a wrong. What I think has been so dangerous about the way the Republican Party has moved into sort of making up your own reality is that it, mental health is the ability to be able to perceive the difference between reality and fantasy. And if you start gradually shifting things in a society to where people are less and less able to tell what's real and what isn't, like for instance with artificial intelligence, which I'm not saying they shouldn't use it, but people should understand there's a difference between doing what's right, and we all inherently feel what's wrong. It's like every religion in the whole world has some version of the golden rule: treat other people the way you would want to be treated. And so that's really kind of the universal religion. And to sort of advocate that we just that we basically overthrow the government and just throw out the Constitution after making, when you take the presidential oath, you vow to protect and follow the Constitution, and then to just trash it. I don't know. I think that's what I think has gone wrong, is that people have started to feel that they can make up their own reality. And it, we understand why they do that on commercials. Like, this tastes great. And then you taste it and you find out, no, it doesn't. But
yeah, it's a misrepresentation. I think advertising
exactly.
probably started it. Well, and where I remember reading, watching this documentary on peanut butter, and they said finally they were making this great peanut butter, and finally somebody said, "Well, how many peanuts do you have to have in peanut butter for it to be peanut butter? I mean, can we just fill it with other stuff?" So they're talking about this amazing nutritious peanut butter, and they've got the least amount of peanuts in there as they possibly can get. And so there you have a change of and let's sweeten it with certain. So yeah, it has started the mid 20th century. I really agree with that.
Yeah.
Where we could create illusion. And
yeah. And I think we need to get back to a compassionate form of basic religious teachings without getting into the dogma and the rigidity around it.
Yeah, I agree. I am with you on that one 100%. And without getting political, I feel that we don't know in our leadership what's right or wrong anymore. And and I find it I thought I was confused when I was in my 20s about politics, but I'm not any better now. But with the messages coming forward, and how do we get back to talking about the truth? How do we do that? Do you have any advice on that?
Well, for 10 years, I was also a recruiter, recruiting people for companies and helping people find jobs. And it's like, if people would just use their common sense and say, okay, let's say when I vote for a president, I'm like the human resources department in a company, and I have to say, who is suited for this job? Well, I never worked with a company that wanted me to find them felons. That might be a disqualifying factor. What do you think? Like, let's get back to common sense. Is like, one person is maybe dull or boring or needs a charisma transplant, but that doesn't disqualify them from, a life of public service. It's like, you don't need the same skills as being an entertainer or an actor. What you need is knowing how to work with other people and compromise. And I think we've moved away from that. We've moved away from, people used to have very, lively discussions of politics, and now people are afraid to even talk about politics because it's too, they're too afraid that, it's going to get, so upsetting. We used to be able to say, well, you think that, and okay, that's your opinion, and this is my opinion, and we don't agree, but we can still be friends. I don't hear that so much anymore.
I've been noticing that a lot too, with social media, but in my personal world as well. It's like, well, how could you agree with something like that? Well, because I don't think it's a thing to agree to. I think the facts that are based on the premise of what you need to agree to aren't facts.
Right. And I think, people used to say, let's agree to disagree. You don't hear that. Another thing I realized we don't, people used to always talk about tempering justice with mercy. You don't hear that anymore. You hear a lot of people, oh, those are the bad guys. They shouldn't, immigrants are bad, and they, all of our ancestors were immigrants. That's why we're all here, but like, people are too quick to judge other people, and instead of being compassionate and charitable and trying to put themselves in the other guy's shoes.
Yeah, that walk a mile in somebody else's shoes that I heard over and over again as a little kid. I think we need to start saying again.
Exactly.
Wow.
And, I noticed things that have changed over time. It's subtle, but if you sometimes you'll think back and think, I haven't heard anybody say that in 30 years.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think these are all really good points. That's why I asked her. I said she's going to say some really good stuff here. But I mean, do you remember when it was horrifying? The days that it was horrifying when somebody in public office lied. That it was shocking. Do you remember that day?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, people expected politician. They expected other foreign countries to be corrupt, but they expected that the United States of America would be upstanding and, tell the truth and all that. And now people are just so cynical, and with good reason.
Yeah, I mean, some of that could have been an illusion as well, upstanding and honest. When you find out, you open the door and find out, oh my God, not that he, but that was the bar that we wanted people to live with, upstanding and honest and forthright. And
everyone might not be able to live up to their values, but it helps to at least know what their values are.
oh, yeah, but if somebody blatantly says I don't have those values aren't mine, but could you vote for me anyway? I'm like, and there have been several public people who have given that message, not just one.
Oh yeah, I know.
So there's that trend that is very disconcerting.
Yes, there have been in both parties, and you're right. There's fraud and corruption all over the place, but there's also good people and honest people all over the place as well.
Sometimes it's a mixture of both. One person will have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but for the most part, if that golden rule wins out, if that honesty runs out, if we just gotta in my mind, it's about raising the bar, and we keep dropping the bar, and I think the bar is underground a little bit right now, but I would like for that to be a priority.
Yeah,
let's raise the bar.
I think the change is coming, but I don't think a change is coming super fast. I mean, I think it's going to be gradual.
Yeah, maybe we just are I thought about this a few times, and what do you think about this? Is we just had to see how low it could go as a society. We just got to see how far can we take this, and before we go no. But I don't know how you feel about that, but do we really need to see this in order to grow? Maybe we do, but see the mismanagement much more clearly, or see the duplicity much more clearly.
Well, in a way, it's kind of like, what it makes me think of is, the darker it is, the more power the light has.
Yeah.
It's, if you can turn on a light in daytime and you barely notice the effect of it because it was already light.
Correct.
So
right.
I don't know. That's I love the whole idea of the analogy of light and dark, because I think that people should find the light within themselves, because I think we all have an indwelling God. We all have that inner light as part of us.
And I agree. And those like you writing or having this podcast or whatever people do to here's the light. Here's the risk I'm taking to show you the light. Here's the effort I'm taking to show you that you too. Like I was wondering how many people were going to listen to this podcast and say, you know what, I'm going to sit down and write. I can do that. I've got something I want to say.
Absolutely. I started out by joining a group of women that wanted to write their own stories, felt like I'm important enough that I should leave my story as a legacy of, I would love to read the diary of somebody who lived in, 1650. What was their life like? I can't even imagine it. And some people did write diaries in 1650.
But yeah, what happened to no? But yes, but even today, so writing the diary of somebody who lived in, 1950, 1960.
And
what if you could write what was it like in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and what it's like now and just compare them? I would love to read that.
Oh yeah. That's a lot of what's in both Kitty Cats and my memoir.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. Yeah, I think we do need to some introspection.
Yeah. Introspection is
Community is it's a good thing right now.
Yeah.
Do it.
I really think that all of life is about spiritual growth one way or another. What matters, what it means to be human, what it means to be kind. The Dalai Lama said, kindness is my religion. I really like that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really, really is. It's beautiful. So you brought some really good pearls of wisdom here that I really appreciate you coming on board. And again, looking up Andrea Burdick, Google or Amazon, and find her and just get one book and try it on and see.
Right.
Wise woman who's
and each book has a little blurb about what it's about, and whichever one you feel drawn to.
Yeah, definitely. And let yourself be inspired. I feel like bringing people like Andrea on to these podcasts, I'm looking for inspiration. I'm looking to bring people another way of thinking. And you really helped me do that tonight, Andrea. Really appreciate
it. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. So I'll be waiting for your next book. Let me know. We'll have you on immediately. Tell them if you have any more ideas about, how we can do the best we can today. We could talk about that again too. But for now, I want to thank my followers for listening to Andrea talk and to support her and learn from her and to be inspired to go forward with your own life, to know that your story, your mark counts and you matter. So for now, reach into your spirit and express it and be creative and find your voice. And thank you.
Absolutely. If every woman could find their voice and use it to be heard, it would be a major improvement all the way around.
It would be, definitely. Well, thank you. And that's all there is this evening. And we'll see you in the next session.
And thank you so much for this opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, you're so welcome. I appreciate it. You gave us a gift, so thank you too.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.